At the very beginning of the work, Gilgamesh is described as one who knew the ways, was wise in all things. And this establishes the central role of knowledge and wisdom in the Epic of Gilgamesh. When the narrative begins, Gilgamesh is not wise in all things, leading the reader to understand that part of the development of the story will center upon his quest for and growth in knowledge. Gilgamesh seeks understanding in various forms throughout the work, and after Enkidu's death, all of his actions are governed by his final question about eternal life. In the course of the story, however, Gilgamesh also learns much about political philosophy, the structure of the earth, and the nature of the gods. The centrality of this quest for knowledge in the epic enables us to view the presentation of man as an intellectual creature whose nature inherently desires knowledge. Notably, this is true not only for Gilgamesh, but for Enkidu as well, who gained reason and expanded his understanding through the civilizing process that he undergoes with the shaman. The contrast between Enkidu and Gilgamesh establishes the dichotomy, that is, the breakdown into two distinct pieces between human civilization and the wilderness, and that is a constant theme throughout this work. While Gilgamesh is first introduced as the builder of Uruk and its walls, and thus, in a sense, civilization, Enkidu is entirely a being of the wilds, until he is seduced by a shaman. Their wrestling match can be understood as representative of the struggle between man and his environment, and their eventual unity and friendship are indicative of an ideal harmony between the two. At the conclusion of the epic, Gilgamesh is reconciled to his eventual death through his acknowledgement of the lasting achievement of having built Uruk. But it is important to recognize that this contentment is realized through his journey in the wilds of the earth. Furthermore, the fact that both Gilgamesh and Enkidu are lonely before they meet one another indicates that man alone, whether in nature or in the city, is not sufficient unto himself. This indicates the essential aspect of human nature that Aristotle identifies. Man is a political animal. Enkidu's important role in correcting the appalling tyranny of Gilgamesh at the opening of the story mirrors the fact that his death propels Gilgamesh to face the difficult reality of inescapable death, and to realize what it is about life that is really of value. While Gilgamesh has dreams forecasting the advent of his friend, their initial meeting is a great struggle, and though Enkidu loses, he manages to curb Gilgamesh's tyrannical passions. This corrective and educative element is an important indication of the depth and value of their friendship. Similarly, though it is Gilgamesh who ignites the fear of Ishtar through his glib response, that means smooth response to her seductions, Enkidu is the one who must suffer the direct consequences of death. The sharing of another's suffering is another important aspect of their friendship. Finally, through death, Enkidu continues to teach Gilgamesh, leading him to seek answers to deeper issues than the simple glory quest with which he had been concerned before. It is through Enkidu's example and friendship that Gilgamesh moves beyond tyranny and ignorance. As is common in many ancient epics, women play an extremely important role in the development of the plot and in shaping the actions and understanding of the male characters. Gilgamesh's mother, the goddess Ninsun, is an important character for guiding Gilgamesh and assisting him in the interpretation of his dreams. Similarly, Enkidu is created by the goddess Aruru, and his path to civilization is directly through Shamat. Ishtar's role is the central pivot of the plot, for Gilgamesh's rejection of her advances leads to Enkidu's death, and is thus the reason for his final quest for Utnapishtim. The goddess Siduri is important both for the assistance that she gives Gilgamesh and for the wisdom that she demonstrates, and Utnapishtim's wife is similarly important for supporting Gilgamesh's cause in front of her husband. It can be useful to compare the role of women in the Epic of Gilgamesh to those in other epics, for example Helen of Troy and Penelope, Athena, Dido, Aphrodite, and Lavinia. Gilgamesh's voyage through the mountain in Tablet 9 and across the waters of death, Tablet 10, is indicative of his intellectual movement to inquire about the very nature of things, and is reminiscent of the presentation of the land of the dead found in other epic literature. Just as Homer's Odysseus crosses the ocean to the land of the dead to speak with Tiresias, and Virgil's Aeneas crosses the river Styx to speak with his father, so too Gilgamesh must journey through the darkness of the mountain and over the waters of death to gain the knowledge he seeks from Utanapishtim. In each of the cases, the character seeks knowledge of some sort, and for Gilgamesh in particular, this is a different motivation from his earlier tyrannical and glory-seeking days. Though at first halted by the scorpion monster, his wife, and Suduri, the sincerity of Gilgamesh's desire to find Utanapishtim convinces them to give him advice. Similarly, in his overzealousness, he destroys the stone death, and yet, despite this, he is sincere enough in his inquiry that Ur-Shanabi does decide to help him. It is this intellectual seriousness that Gilgamesh displays that enables him to move from the things of this world to inquire about those beyond death. After all the great feats that Gilgamesh accomplishes, the seeming banality, that is, the commonplace nature of Utanapishtim's challenge to stay awake for 6 days and 7 nights, serves as an important revelation of the limits of human nature. Gilgamesh fails in his attempt to stay awake, and Utanapishtim's wife, recording time with the aging loaves of bread, is similarly emphatic about the simple physical limitations that bar Gilgamesh from being an immortal. These physical limitations are, moreover, joined to indications of intellectual limitations that separate man from the gods. Even after he is given directions and procures the plant that will return one to youth, Gilgamesh loses it through an absent-minded carelessness while swimming. The limitations of human nature that Gilgamesh realizes are not without fruit, however, for upon his return to Uruk, he relishes the goodness of his city and civilization. Indeed, as is recounted at the beginning of the Epic of Gilgamesh, he writes down the story of his adventures in learning and preserves the story for future generations, indicating the final value that he places upon knowledge. The gods in the Epic of Gilgamesh are, as is often the case in ancient literature, immortal but anthropomorphized creatures with fickle minds and conflicting wills. Anthropomorphized means to be put in a human form. It is notable that Gilgamesh and Enkidu receive the aid of Shamash and Insun in their struggle with Humbaba, but when Ishtar falls in love with Gilgamesh and tempts him, they receive no supernatural aid or advice. Ishtar is initially presented as a vindictive character, as her fanatic anger when rebuffed by Gilgamesh is the direct cause of Enkidu's death. When Utanapishtim tells the story of the flood, however, Ishtar is a sympathetic character who weeps for the destruction of humanity. The various gods are similarly split in their opinions about the flood before it happened, but are subsequently terrified by the force of the destructive weather. The god Enlil is likewise fickle, for though he planned the flood to destroy all of humanity, he quickly changes his mind when he finds Utanapishtim and his wife. It is helpful to compare the role of the gods here to those in other epics or ancient literatures, especially the Greek and Egyptian gods.